I'll start it then. All right. Well, okay. I'd like to thank everybody for joining this call. Obviously, we're in some very unique times that's going on, but um, the struggle that many of us already know about is unfolding in front of our eyes, right? Literally in front of the TVs that we're forced to have to stay in the house and watch. Some of the struggles and some of the decisions being made by the ruling class under the leadership of Donald Trump, and some of the struggling interests around public health that are being exposed, the question of the economy, the question of the very way that the capitalist production system and food chain works. It's all being exposed for everyone, whether you've got an advanced political worldview or not. And hopefully there are some lessons being learned. But of course, without summation and without organization, it could all just be that, the ruling class can find a way to recover. And it will do all that it can to save itself at the expense of Black, brown, and working class people. It'll jettison what it needs to. This discussion that we are trying to have today really was a part of the process that obviously has now been eclipsed. It was around the question of in the context of the presidential campaign happening here in the United States. We didn't see any path of leadership coming that would represent the interests of working class people, the interests of Black and Latino people, and other colonized people in this country. The question for us has always been to be, how do we advance our struggle? How do we use every battlefront to be able to organize and to fight for our interests? And so the planning that we had started around having a discussion around an independent labor party based in unions, based in oppressed communities, was already in the works. And this was in the context of even Bernie running as a Democratic socialist in the Democratic Party. And it too was exposing all kinds of contradictions that came to a head. And so we still need to have this conversation. Things will go back, and we have to still always be organized, and we have to be asking the questions. Can we do better than this? Can we organize better than this? Can we represent our interests better? We can't allow the ruling class to just take all this space and in the name of working class people, in the name of poor and working people, take this space. And so we wanted to have this discussion. We wanted to kind of bring an initial group of people in. It was hoped that we could do a conference in Baltimore. There are a lot of struggles here. It's a majority Black city. It is completely dominated by the Democratic Party, and it is completely backwards. There's a high murder rate here. Unemployment is high. Miseducation is high. It is a literal battleground if you're a Black and working class in this city. And it is completely in the hands of the Democratic Party, which does everything it can possibly do to keep independent and independent candidates, and especially independent working class parties off the ballot. And so we wanted to be here. We wanted people to come see this city, but we also wanted to move the discussion forward about a national labor party, and also in Maryland having a Black worker-led political party. So that's some of the context. I'm sure if I missed some things that other speakers want to introduce it, but I think it's important, again, for Black workers to be a part of this discussion, for us to define for the whole working movement what our relationship should be, what others' relationship should be to us. We are ultimately struggling for our national liberation on our own terms. And we want to be able to talk honestly with people who want to be our comrades about what it's going to take to win our unity and to be able to support our movement, and to sometimes make hard decisions about how we move forward as a working class movement that doesn't use Black people, brown people's struggles, right, to advance itself, but then leave us in the dust to regather ourselves. So we think this is an important discussion. All right.
Thank you. All right, Millie or Sandy wants to go next?
I was next.
All right.
So welcome to our organizing meeting. I'm Millie Phillips. I'm a founding member of the Labor Fight Back Network and Labor and Community for an Independent Party, LCIP. And I thank you for joining us today. Both today's pandemic and the defeat of the Sanders campaign are revealing dramatically why we need to break with the twin parties of the bosses. Having our own party is literally a matter of human survival. As Friedrich Engels once said, freedom is the recognition of necessity. And once we recognize what is necessary, then the next step is to get to work. So I'm truly excited that we are coming together today, inspired by LCIP's two-pronged approach to building this party of necessity. The first prong is to build a real base for this party from the bottom up by organizing local coalitions to bring together the labor movement and the most oppressed sectors of the working class, with the goal of running independent candidates committed to democratically decided platforms. Second is to form a new committee within the labor movement advocating this approach. By doing so, we can address the three main obstacles that in the past have prevented successful challenges to the ruling class's two parties. First, past efforts to build a working class or labor party failed, as Nnamdi has talked about, to center the vital intersection of race and class. Our ruling class very effectively uses racism and xenophobia to prevent many white workers from recognizing that their interests depend on supporting others who are oppressed and exploited. Thus, any new party that rightfully focuses on the working class as a whole is doomed to failure if its central leadership does not include activists from communities of color from the very beginning. Yet, no matter how grounded in oppressed communities, a party that fails to recognize and engage the power of organized labor is likely to remain limited to support within its specific base. Second, while we want to run candidates with a realistic goal of winning, a labor community party must be built not on the charisma of individual candidates, but by engaging with the issues faced in local communities. Independent working class candidates who win election without an active community base are subject to being co-opted, or if loyal to their promises, to failing to win their demands. Third, we are practical. Past efforts often have been marginalized by haranguing voters to support quixotic presidential or statewide campaigns with minuscule chances of winning. Recognizing that electoral law and the prohibitive cost of most elections make it virtually impossible for independent working class candidates to win any office above the local level. We want to start locally and build up. If we can win local elections, then we are in a much better position to gain the volunteer base and money needed to run successfully for higher offices. So I thank you again and welcome to this vital discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Sandy?
Hi, folks. I'm a retired healthcare worker, having worked in the vineyards of our medical industrial complex for over 50 years and continuing the struggle. I want to fully support the vision Nnamdi and Millie have just laid out, and maybe give some specific examples of why that vision is so necessary right now. Let me just start by quoting a good friend of mine, Judy Sheridan Gonzalez, who's the president of the New York State Nurses Association, who is an emergency room nurse in the Bronx. And I quote, "We are dying. We are getting sick. It doesn't matter how many ventilators we get if we are dead and cannot run the ventilators. If respiratory therapists, if doctors, if nurses, if frontline caregivers are sick and dying, there won't be anyone left to take care of the public." Now, I want to say we're going through this triple-layered crisis, this public health crisis, and what comes along with it is a financial crisis, and imposed on this is the political crisis. Democracy is too valuable to leave to the Democratic Party and its ways. But it isn't just that we have an idiot or a miscreant in the White House. That's certainly true. But going back over the decades, I've seen this coming. This was entirely predictable, this triple layered mess that we're in right now. We can go back, we can talk about Reagan and his attacks on labor, PATCO particularly, the union which was foolish enough to endorse him in the first place, and his deficit spending to run the Soviet Union out of business. But we need to look at also Clinton. George Herbert Walker Bush wasn't able to get his NAFTA passed, so they had to bring in Bill Clinton, a minority president, in order to ram that through at the same time that he was playing around with healthcare reform of a bizarre reactionary type. He balanced the budget on the backs of our nation's poorest. My community, my working class city of Quincy in Massachusetts, lost its 100-year-old visiting nurse association during that round of cutbacks. He and Biden together, with Newt Gingrich in the House, managed to devastate what the working class and its allies had been able to build up over many decades in terms of public health. At the American Nurses Association convention in either 96 or 98, I forget which one, Clinton was the keynote speaker. And he came, besides giving his usual stump speech about welfare reform, which nobody wanted to listen to. At the end of that speech, a delegate, a nurse, got up, took the mic on a point of personal privilege. With tears in her eyes, she was talking about the demise of a public health infrastructure in this country. It's been worn down. After 9/11, after the SARS epidemic in the early 2000s, my union, the Massachusetts Nurses Association, convened an emergency preparedness task force, and we tried to reach out because our members wanted to find out how they could be best prepared for the next crisis. Most towns in Massachusetts no longer had a public health officer, and this is supposedly a very blue state. Our efforts to create a single-payer quasi-Medicare for all system in Massachusetts have been going on for 25 years. Our bill has never been allowed out of committee, even though the Democrats have a veto-proof majority in both the House and the Senate in the state. So it's about class rule. The fiction of political parties really making that big a difference is a cruel hoax. We have enemies, well-dressed and well-built enemies. So all I can say is we need to build an independent force. People are fighting back. People are fighting back spontaneously. People are fighting back in organized ways on a local level. We need to bring these streams of struggle together and to have an independent political expression that will be reflected in the electoral process at the bottom, starting from the bottom and going up. But fight back needs to be organized, and organization is power. And the working class needs to get its act together. And all of us in the communities of color, our oppressed communities, who's being hit most? Who's being hit the hardest right now? I know, speaking for Massachusetts, the city of Chelsea and the abutting cities of East Boston and Revere are the epicenter of our public health crisis. Communities where communities that have been neglected in terms of healthcare needs, individuals from those communities who have been treated dismissively when seeking health. Communities that have learned that the healthcare industry isn't necessarily on their side. So together we really need to turn this around, and we will. During the course of the discussion, I know we'll hear from other specific flashpoints of this crisis, and that will illuminate why we really need to move on. So sisters and brothers, let's move on to the job of organizing what needs to be organized to get the job done. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks to all the opening speakers. So that was just opening remarks, and now we have a panel on the fight back during the pandemic.
We also actually have some greetings to read from a few people.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes. Who would like to do those readings?
There are 3 of us who will be doing that. Myself and Alan and Namdi will each be doing one of them.
Fantastic.
So I'll start with a
Thank
greeting
you.
from Nancy Wolforth.
Could I interject something?
Yes.
Just a suggestion. Could the host, maybe there's a reason you're not doing it, but maybe the host could put the person speaking on the big screen.
So that is up to you. You can go up to speaker view. Sorry, I should have mentioned this. Up in the upper right corner, it says speaker view or gallery view.
Right?
And if you click that, you should, whoever is speaking, if you click on speaker view, then whoever is speaking should be the biggest on your screen.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to read greetings from Nancy Wolforth. I wish I could be with you live online, but my health situation does not make this possible. Today's organizing meeting is important. Yes, the time is now to begin laying the groundwork of an independent labor-based political party rooted in the trade unions and the organizations of the oppressed communities. 2 resolutions adopted by the National Convention of the AFL-CIO in October 2017 are our reference point. The first one states, quote, whether the candidates are elected from the Republican or Democratic Party, the interests of Wall Street have been protected and advanced, while the interests of working people have generally been set back, unquote. Does that ever ring true today? The second convention resolution talks about the need to break with the lesser of 2 evils and to create a labor-based political party. As those of us who have been in the labor movement for many years have learned, we cannot rely on the top officials of the labor movement to get the ball rolling on these 2 resolutions. The urgent need to break the grip of the 2-party system is our task as organizers and rank and file leaders in the labor movement and in the Black, Latino, and LGBTQ movements, among others. The 2 AFL-CIO resolutions take us back to the Labor Party founded by visionary leader Tony Mazzocchi in the 1990s. His affirmation that the bosses have 2 parties, workers need one of our own, is no less true today. We need to renew the struggle for an independent labor-based party, this time from the bottom up. We need to ground it firmly in local unions and labor community coalitions, building trust among coalition partners, running independent candidates on a local level, and then coordinating efforts on a state level and ultimately on a national level before founding a national party. I like the method and conceptual framework that we have adopted. It's a method that will open doors for this work within the trade union movement. Let's now map out the steps necessary to make this effort a reality. Let's promote United Front campaigns and identify cities where we can begin running independent labor community candidates. The time is now to do this. We'll turn it over to Alan.
Yes, we have a greeting from Baldemar Velasquez, who's a National Executive Board member of the AFL-CIO, President of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee. Baldemar could not be on this call. He's in North Carolina today, visiting the 700 labor camps, which are organized by Flock, and he was on his way in a truck visiting on his way to North Carolina to bring masks, gel, wipes, all the protective equipment that is being denied these workers, including funds that are being denied to them. The federal stimulus package, not 1 cent earmarked for farm workers, no equipment, no regulations, no inspectors. Baldemar told me we have to rely on ourselves. He said one of the themes of our work is mobilizing and organizing in our own name. Clarence Thomas will recognize that from the Million Worker March. That's really our method. And he sent a brief greeting, which Namdi, I hope you have lined up so we can listen to Baldemar.
We do. I'm going to share the audio in a second.
I just wanted to ask really quickly, Desiree, did you have your hand up? Was that what the little hand symbol on your screen was? Oh, you're on mute if you're, sorry.
No, actually, I'm figuring this great program out. I don't know what just happened, but
I
there's
think you accidentally just shared screen, so you could
Uh-oh.
go up to the top, I think, and then it should be a way to stop sharing screen. Let's see what I can do here.
Thank
Okay.
you. So no, I'm figuring this out, and at the bottom there's reactions, and it gives you two
Okay.
reactions
Okay.
to clap
Great.
hands. So I
just
thought
wasn't-
that was good.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, sorry, Namdi.
Hold on one second. How do I not share screen?
You're not sharing it anymore.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am now.
No, that's,
I think that's Namdi's screen. I think that was the confusion. Namdi is sharing screen.
Can you hear the audio? Can you hear the audio?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, no.
No, we cannot hear the audio.
No, sorry. We can hear your audio, but not the audio.
Okay, that's interesting. I thought it would work that way. Okay, we may have to skip
Andy,
that.
you didn't press the diamond. You didn't press the diamond to start it.
I did. Let's try it one more time. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try one other thing to see if we can get the audio to play. All right. Hopefully that doesn't drive people crazy, seeing themselves.
I suggest we move on and we make that available at some other point.
All right. Sorry about that, comrades. We thought that would work.
No worries. It's all good.
All right. The computer audio works from the microphone unless you go into settings and have it work from your hardware. But we should probably just move on.
Yes. Yeah, maybe you can figure that out in the meantime. Okay. So I believe now we're at the first panel.
no, Namdi was going to read something from Bertoni Dupont.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
If we have the agenda in front of us, it's helpful.
I do, but I thought that was the reading was the audio, and then we were skipping that. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll read this quickly again from Bertoni Dupont from Haiti Liberté. Dear comrades, meeting at the organizing meeting of the Break the Grip of the Two-Party System Conference. I send you greetings on behalf of Haiti Liberté, which has endorsed the LCIP and supports the efforts to build the Baltimore Conference at the end of July. Today, the leaders of the international economic elite are afraid of the reaction of the working masses after the pandemic. They are afraid of the fact that the workers, thanks to the social economic debacle caused by the COVID-19, had discovered their lies, their fraudulent operations. The COVID-19 exposed them in the face of the demands of the masses. They are afraid of the workers' anger at the cost of living, poverty, and the liquidation of public services, anger that could lead to a social explosion. Today, in the face of this pandemic, Haitian workers are raising the need to build their own political organization, a workers' party. Only this tool is capable of enabling them not only to resist against the bosses, but also to defend their own interests. The same is true in the United States, the heartland of US imperialism, where building a labor-based party, a workers' party, is an urgent necessity. US workers must recognize the need to replace capitalist society with another one that will not defend the banks and the companies of the bosses, but that will be at the service of the workers, the youth, the peasants, the country, and humanity in general. On behalf of the Haitian workers, I wish you a productive organizing meeting.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I believe now we're ready for the first panel. Panel one, fight back during the pandemic. So I think the problem is I have an old agenda. So who is on the first panel? I don't have the full final list of speakers. I apologize for that.
Jerry Levinsky.
Jerry, yeah, okay. Thank you, Jerry.
What we have: Jerry, Clarence, Desiree, Gabe, Reverend Annie Chambers, Luis Angel, Jim Lafferty, and closing with Saladin.
Excellent. Maya, could you send me that, please? Thank you. Okay. Who'd like to go first? Jerry? You're on mute.
How's that?
Great. All right. And so it'll be 5 minutes each.
Great. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. My name is Jerry Levinsky. I'm an organizer with SEIU Local 509 in Massachusetts. I'm a delegate to the Western Mass Area Labor Federation, and I'm an instructor part-time in the Labor Studies program at UMass Amherst. And most significant, I'm a member of the steering committee of the Labor Fight Back Network. Something that is perhaps the greatest honor of my life to be involved in. I work with an amalgamated local that has approximately 20,000 members in Massachusetts, the oldest SEIU local in Massachusetts. It has both private sector and state employees, mostly human service workers. I work primarily in the public sector division, although I worked for a number of years with private sector human service workers as well. We, as others have pointed out, are in a profound moment where working people are literally fighting for their lives. And I see this every day in the work that I do. The situation confronting working people has, as a result of the circumstances that we now confront, has changed dramatically, both in terms of the stakes, both regarding their health and safety, literally the question of who will live and who will die, because working people are dying in this country as a result of the conditions that they're facing in the workplaces that they go to and are expected to go to. The people that I work with are essential workers. They work in facilities including hospitals, nursing homes, and other inpatient facilities, and they don't have the luxury of being at home and taking care of themselves and closing the door and keeping out the exigencies and the dangers that we confront at this time. They have to go to work, and what is inspiring to me is the extent of the commitment and the passion of the people that are the members of Local 509 to trying to be there for the communities and the patients and the families that they serve every single day. But under those circumstances, they are confronting some deeply, deeply disturbing situations. On the one hand, it's no surprise to know that in private sector institutions or entities or organizations, they mostly couldn't give a shit about workers or worker safety. They're primarily concerned with profit, and that's how they operate with regards to the way in which they treat their workers. On the other hand, in the public sector, you have two things that are operating. You either have bureaucrats that are either too incompetent or too scared to make the decisions that are necessary to protect workers, or you also have the results of austerity budgets, which have been dismantling and destroying the public sector resources of this country for decades now, and it's gotten worse in recent decades. And as a result of that, I'm confronting a situation, many of you may have heard about it, it's making national, if not international news, involving an entity called the Holyoke Soldiers Home. This is not a VA institution, it's a state-run soldiers home in Holyoke, Massachusetts, one of the poorest working class cities in Massachusetts. And this is a 75-year-old facility that has a deep and beloved history in the state and particularly in Western Massachusetts. And as a result of austerity budgets, which have reduced nursing levels, social worker levels, human service worker levels, as a result of political appointments, of bringing people in for decades who are just literally political hacks, as a result of who they know and what their relationship is to the powers that be in the Democratic Party. We have entered a situation, we now have a situation there where 73 veterans have died as a result of the mismanagement of this soldiers' home, where there's now multiple investigations, local, state, and federal investigations going on there to try to figure out what happened. They removed the executive officer, but he's going to be kind of a fall guy because there's a lot of people who are responsible for what happened there. The meaning of all this, of course, is that Holyoke is an example of something that I'm seeing across the state, which is that working people go to work in these positions every single day, and they're terrified. They're terrified for themselves. They're terrified for the people that they serve. They're terrified for their families. They're terrified for their communities. They make the decision, they are forced to make decisions about whether or not to continue working in jobs where their lives and other people's lives that they love and care about are on the line, or to leave their job and enter into an abyss financially that they don't know if they'll ever be able to return from.
Jerry, you're at time. Could you just finish your sentence, please?
Yeah. The result of this has been that on the positive side of this has been that there is a deeply changed consciousness in the labor movement, at least as I see it, with regards to the genuine and foundational importance of the unions that people belong to, and the investment that people are willing to make in their unions as a mechanism to fight back against these conditions. Let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Clarence.
Greetings to all. It's great to see many of you comrades, brothers and sisters. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very well.
Okay. Can you hear? I'm coming through loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
All right.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Good to see you, Ralph, Maya, and other comrades that I haven't seen in a long time. My name is Clarence Thomas, and I'm a third-generation longshore worker, retired, past Secretary-Treasurer of ILWU Local 10, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. I am co-founder of the Million Worker March movement that Alan Benjamin referred to earlier in connection to Brother Baltimore Velasquez. It's important to note that Baltimore was one of the early endorsers of the Million Worker March, and my solidarity greetings go out to him. I'm reminded by a very profound statement that he made once in Detroit at a Million Worker March movement, where he said that solidarity is not an empty slogan, and it is not. And the ILWU has a long history of being able to live up to what that really means, whether or not it is refusing to handle cargo from the Zim ships in support of the Palestinians, refusal to handle South African cargo during the anti-apartheid struggle, and many, many other struggles. I'm currently involved with an organization called the East Oakland Stadium Alliance to stop the privatization of the Port of Oakland, the third busiest port on the West Coast, from being privatized by John Fisher, who owns the Gap and who also owns the Oakland A's. Today, I'd like to speak specifically to the tremendous rank and file resistance that is being put up by ILWU Local 10, which is the only African-American longshore union on the West Coast. For those of you who may not know, longshore workers are essential workers. They are responsible for the loading and unloading of maritime cargo, carrying many of the items that we use in our everyday lives, whether it's driving a car, the food that we eat, the shoes that we wear. Local 10 has been in the vanguard of all longshore workers across the country in terms of confronting the opposition of employers, specifically in the case of the ILWU. The Pacific Maritime Association represents various shipping and stevedoring companies. Stevedoring Services of America, it employs more than 60% of the longshore workers in the city of Oakland. They've been some of the most belligerent and difficult employers to deal with when it comes to the question of providing health and safety on the job. And in response to that, LWU Local 10 has been doing something which is very critical for all workers to do. And that is, when we don't get what we want, we have to take action at the point of production, which means not going to work. It's important to point out that some of the key leaders of ILWU Local 10 and 34 that have been in the vanguard of this struggle have been members of the veterans and organizers of the Million Worker March. Trent Willis, who is the president of Local 10, Keith Shanklin, who's the president of Local 34, and in the Pacific Northwest, Gabriel Proud, past president of ILWU Local 52. It's important for me to highlight this because the truth of the matter is that the ILWU is no longer the militant organization that it once was. And I think that a great deal of that has to do with the fact that the ILWU leadership is now moving to the right. There was a recent newspaper article in the Dispatcher which shows longshore workers tying up the Mercy hospital ship. And there was no coverage at all of the longshore workers at Local 10, 34, 75, and 91 who had the responsibility of encountering the Grand Princess. The Grand Princess vessel, which in fact had passengers on that vessel who had the virus, not to mention the fact that there was debris from the vessel that the employers insisted had to be put onto a truck and trucked through the community. Local 10 sounded the alarm to the community to let them know of this development. Local 10 has been not only advocating for its own members, but for the community as well. I don't know how much time I've got, but 1 minute, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you, brother. What I'd like to talk about right now is that on May Day, we will be having a remembering those who have died fighting for our lives, our families, and our unions. We will be having a caravan that will start at 10 a.m. in the morning at 1717 Middle Harbor Road at the Port of Oakland. We will then be rendezvousing and going through all of the city of Oakland. This will be the fifth consecutive year that ILWU Local 10 has refused to work on May Day. This was initiated by the Million Worker March starting in 2005. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'm still on red here. Okay, just to clarify, I think what I'm gonna do is I will have a 2-minute yellow warning. And if you are speaking, if you could go to gallery view, that way you can see my screen. So you can see if I have a red, right now I have red, I'm gonna change it back. So I'll do a 2-minute yellow warning and a 1-minute red warning. And then at time, I will politely ask you to finish up your sentence. And I may be able to try to send you a IM, but yeah, go to gallery view if you're speaking, and then you should be able to see my screen. Okay, next is Desiree Rojas. Desiree?
Okay, can everybody hear me? Am I too loud or loud enough? Okay, because I tend to speak loud. I want to say muchas gracias. Thank you very much for giving LACLA the opportunity to come out and to talk about some of the work we're doing and what we're seeing happening. What everyone has covered has been absolutely right on with our observation. I first want to acknowledge we have one of our e-board members, Gabriel Torres, who's also on, and my father, Al Rojas, is getting on right now too. But demand letter to the governor, and I think you saw that. And interesting enough, this letter has done a lot of great things, meaning bringing some awareness to Cal OSHA and their failed job and what needs to happen in California with assessing and protecting workers, going out into essential worker sites and assessing jobs and the needs of workers. And that's just not happening. But getting back to this letter has reached, we believe, over 30,000 people, which is great because people have been calling in and into the governor's office and giving their feedback. But it also got the attention of certain people in Washington, D.C. And so the concern was that our demand letter was a bit harsh, which we found to be shocking because we believe that our letter was actually kind of nice because we could get a lot harder. So in this demand letter, we covered a lot of things. We covered the fact that farm workers are essential workers, but in reality, we know that they've always been essential workers, but the real discussion here is national security. We have farm workers who are harvesting fruits and vegetables, packaging this food, and it's not only providing food on the tables of millions of Americans in California and across this nation, but it's also through NAFTA and in the world. We are feeding the world, a large portion of the world. And without farm workers, you know, there's nothing in place for people to do this work, right? And so if we lose and cut the pay of farm worker pay, like this president wants to do, we're talking about a national security. You think things are bad now? Wait till the farm workers walk off their jobs. Right now, there's a slow period, and there's a lot of concern with housing for farm workers because they won't be able to come back, and with this pandemic, it's even is the protection of farm workers, and we want to bring attention to California and the governor putting to work those who have lost their jobs into positions with as Cal OSHA agents to go out and protect workers on site. The bottom line is that this feels like a capitalism reset button. Capitalism isn't working, and in the process, they want to reinvent capitalism, and they want to be able to squash the worker, and they want to be able to write the new framework of what a worker looks like in this country and in the world. So the opportunity right now for us to organize, mobilize, resist, and to challenge this two-party system is extremely important. What we need to carry in a new party is not only a workers' party, but we need to interject healthcare for all. SB 562 was lost in California because the Democrats killed it. Well, if we had it in California today, I'm going to tell you, it would have taken off like a domino effect in the country, and we would have had it in the country right now, and it wouldn't be an issue during this pandemic. But they on purpose put it in the Bernie Sanders campaign to turn it into a national part of his structure and his campaign, knowing they were never going to give it to Bernie and they were going to squash him. And so that was a part of that, the two-party system strategy of killing it. And the problem is that, like they say, if you want something to die, send it to the Democratic Party. We need to stop we need to move these mobilization, healthcare mobilization party, and that people.
You're breaking up, but please
Otherwise,
finish your sentence.
Otherwise, parties are going to kill it on purpose. So building another party or workers' parties is extremely important and vital right now. And if you haven't seen our letter, please, we could send it to you, or I think Alan has sent it to you. And that's our message right now, is please support farm workers.
Thank you. It's Gabe.
Can you hear me?
I'm muted. Yes, Gabe, there you are. Excellent. So
you guys can hear me.
So, yes.
Yes. So
go ahead.
So I'm a healthcare facility worker. We've been working about 3 to 4 20-hour shifts a week and 2 to 3 18-hour shifts. Part of what we're doing is reopening a hospital that was closed in December, which is almost complete. The military actually, after the hard work was done, sent in some nurses and doctors to staff it in the event that it's needed. In New Jersey, one of the biggest issues is the lack of tests. Today was the first day we went below a 40% positivity rate, which is astronomically high, and the CDC's told us our numbers are probably off by a factor of 10. One of the cleaning crew assigned to help us has already been infected. Most of us have had either a slight fever or a slight cough for a while, but we're mostly isolated from other workers and patients. So we continue working as long as we're not around too many other people. One of the biggest issues that they're seeing is the lack of preparedness in terms of oxygen, and of course ventilators was a major issue. There's the total number is classified, but probably less than 25,000 ventilators in the country. One of the things that's been a media narrative is that they weren't needed as much as originally thought, but the truth is a lot of the people that could have been saved with ventilators are already dead in New York and northern New Jersey. So it's not an issue that they're not needed, it's an issue that they're too late. An issue in Philadelphia where so far there's still a incredible lack of testing. There's 12,000 cases, but I believe there's been less than 50,000 tests, is that Hahnemann Hospital, which was closed last fall, which has 550 beds, is sitting there unused. The city did try to enter talks with AAHS, which owns it, Joel Freeman, their CEO, but he was going to charge them $1 million a month rent. In addition to, they had to, of course, shoulder the costs of renovating and basically clearing it out when it was all over, in addition to the fact that most of the equipment was already gone. An important issue that I haven't seen covered very much is that before this outbreak reached the United States, there was a critical shortage of PPE because Cardinal Health, which is, I believe, one of the 2 biggest suppliers worldwide, issued a recall for 9 million sterile surgical gowns, everything they made for 2 years. And as a result, they canceled the contract with Holyoke, which is the contractor in China manufacturing it. Even though they had known 2 years earlier there were quality issues. That manufacturer also made masks and other gowns, so all of a sudden there's a huge lack of materials. Just as the outbreak was starting, they announced that recall on January 30th. And the last thing I'd just like to touch on is the delivery workers who are keeping us alive. Still, with very few exceptions, haven't been issued gloves, sanitizer, or masks. The hospital has been able to get them occasionally some basic masks, just rubbing alcohol, but it's not a steady supply. It's nothing that we can actually guarantee them. And considering the health issues that a couple of our drivers have already had, there's one who's out with COVID-19 and two that have had cancer in the past year. It's incredibly concerning that the lack of assistance they're having. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Reverend Annie Chambers?
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters and comrades. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some light on what's happening here in Baltimore City with public housing tenants. And I live in a development called Douglas Homes, where we are struggling every day to just get food to put on our table, to have food to eat, and to just get supplies to clean our home with. I'm a community activist. I'm an organizer. Been an organizer now for over 62 years. Been in this struggle a long, long time. But we are having such a hard time at this point to just homeless and poor working class people and just poor people. We are really catching it. The homeless have nowhere to stay. The mayor promised that he would at least get 300 rooms. We got over 7,000 homeless people that we counted, but he was going to get 300 rooms and have not gotten any rooms. They did put 20 people in a school, but he was supposed to get get hotel rooms, 350 as a matter of fact. In Douglas Homes, they declared that we could not have anyone deliver or bring any food distributions into HABC property, which we defied. I defied that because how was we going to live? We was going to be down here starving. The stores is price gouging for the people that has a little money. Eggs went from $2 to $3 a dozen, up to 8, 9, 10, some places 12. We got one store, supermarket, and the shelves were basically bare. So I put out a call for all, anybody that would help us all over the city, state, and we even got some food from DC. And from down off the Eastern Shore, people brought us food because we had nothing. We live day to day, whatever. We're at the mercy of other people supporting and helping us right now. We've been blessed that the APC workers, PPC workers, I will get it right in a moment. PPA workers have come and helped us. We've been helped by the Franciscan Center, and we did have another supplier, but the Housing Authority threatened them, so they backed out. But we, nevertheless, lots of people have helped us. They threatened to put me in jail and evict me for getting food and feeding people every day. But I fought, and I'm still fighting and challenging. But we had to get a lawyer to come in and to, and help us. And we have, we have been working real hard trying to just survive down here. There's over 487 families in this development. There's 275 single individuals, and I counted them along with not the homeless, but the seniors in with them. So right now we're still struggling for food all over the city for public housing. okay, for public housing development, public housing tenants. So we still in the fight, and we very much want to help build a party that will take, we need a workers' party, a party that will take on the issues. We don't need a capitalist class. And we, you know, need a socialist workers' party, so a party that would take on the masses of, you know, things for poor people. So I thank y'all for listening, and we want to be a part of building the party. Thank you.
Thank you. Luis Angel?
Hi, everyone. Can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. It's with great enthusiasm that I join you all here today. Just quickly about myself. Name is Luis Angel. I am an undocumented immigration attorney. I've been in the immigrant rights movement since the historic marches of 2006, and I've been in the front lines both under the Obama administration and now under the Trump administration in the last 5 years as a removal defense attorney fighting deportations. I am also coordinating a loose network of about of neighborhood committees organized in 23 different states that are resisting raids and deportations called Rapid Response Networks. And it is with this experience that I humbly present a couple of points to this group. As has been said, the problems facing working class people have seldom been more dire, and seldom the need for a truly independent working class political party more necessary. Nowhere is this question more pressing than in the immigrant community, and no question more important for us to properly address in this time. As you know, immigration was the Trojan horse that Trump rode to the White House under the sham of putting American workers first, quote unquote. It has been central to his first term. It's been key to fomenting the reactionary forces of white supremacy in this country, forces that have become reinvigorated under this administration. No two ways about it, right? This administration's attacks on immigrants have been ruthless. We see it on the news every day. I witness this every day, what amounts to ethnic cleansing. I see this in my clients and the families that I represent. From the administration's zero tolerance policy, where 5,500 children were separated from their parents and where hundreds remain unaccounted for to this day, as if these children evaporated into thin air, to the January 2019 Migrant Protections Protocol, better known as the Remain in Mexico policy, where 60,000 asylum seekers, parents and children, are currently forced to live in crowded and dangerous camps along the border, exposed to violence, rape, kidnapping, and not to mention the raging COVID-19 pandemic. This policy was shamelessly upheld by the Supreme Court just a month ago. Other examples amount from the administration's Muslim ban, which the Supreme Court also upheld, to the administration's executive order rescinding the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, a program which I'm a beneficiary of, which has left 800 undocumented youth like myself in limbo and exposed to deportation, a case currently pending before the Supreme Court. To the administration's policy just 2 days ago, halting most legal migration to the United States from all countries for 60 days under the pretext to protect, quote unquote, American workers from the swelling unemployment caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there's no question in the immigrant rights movement, in the immigrant community, about the real threat presented by the Trump administration. We know, we spend every waking hour fighting it, tooth and nail. But more importantly, there is a growing perspective in the leadership of the immigrant rights movement that the Democrats are no lesser evil. A perspective borne out by the experience and 15 years of struggle against Democrats and Republicans alike, a perspective that any true working class party must tap into. It would be a missed opportunity for us not to heed these lessons from the immigrant rights movement. So let me touch just on a couple of things. First, we must be clear that the Trump administration did not create the deportation regime we are living under. Trump has enacted no new laws. His administration has merely enforced existing laws drafted and signed into law by the Clinton administration in the infamous 1996 bill. These laws gave unprecedented power to the federal government to militarize the border, criminalize immigrants, and detain and deport families on a mass scale never seen before. These are the laws of the Democratic Party. Second, the immigrant rights movement knows all too well that the laws created by Clinton administration were perfected by another Democrat, the Obama and Biden administration, during the Great Recession, as a means to discipline and divide the working class at precisely the same time that the Obama administration and the Democrats were bailing out the ruling class in the largest window in American history. The sophisticated machinery that leveraged for-profit detention centers and state-of-the-art surveillance technology to militarize the border, to establish a deportation militia in the interior under ICE that could effectively leverage every local law enforcement agency in the country, every database to identify, to track, to detain, and to deport immigrants on a mass scale was the Obama and Biden administration. Just to finish, I just want to say that under the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a growing wave of hunger strikes in detention centers that have pitted Democrats and local jurisdictions against the immigrant rights movement. Democrats have increasingly been bought off by private detention centers, which have sided with expanding detention in places like California, Texas, Louisiana, because the immigrant rights movement is fighting for the liberation of people in detention, which increasingly under the COVID-19 pandemic means a death sentence for immigrants. The reality of the Democratic Party has been clearly shown to the immigrant rights movement. And it's in these localities that we must run local, independent, working class candidates, because it is the local Democrats, not the Republicans, that have sided with local detention centers and with private detention centers. This experience just in the last year under this Trump administration has exposed the corrupt nature of the Democratic Party. And finally, the rights movement regarding the Democratic Party, its corrupt nature, is something that we must tap into. Places like McFarland in California, places in Texas and Louisiana are ready and are eager and are hungry for independent Labor Party candidates, and we must tap into that. So thank you very much. I'm very encouraged by the presence also of the Black community of brothers and sisters in Baltimore, and by Brother Clarence Thomas. The immigrant rights movement looks to the Black community. So I really look forward to forging these bonds and to building an independent party, because Biden is no alternative, is no lesser evil to the immigrant rights movement. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is Jim Lafferty? Jim, are you on?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sorry. Go
I
ahead.
didn't see the icon
Anyway,
for
I'm
the
here.
question.
Great.
Luis, where are you working from?
So we're
Are
gonna,
you in
as soon as we finish the speakers, we can have maybe we'll have people be able to give 1-minute remarks and ask questions of the speakers. That'd be all right. Thank you.
Happy to address that.
All right, great. Thank you, Desiree. All right, Jim.
Yeah, hi, Jim Lafferty. I'm so thrilled to be with you, and so thrilled to know that this is going on, and proud to be even a small part of it. You know, sisters and brothers, one thing sadly is crystal clear by now, and that is, following the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the world and its people are going to be in far, far worse shape than all but a few of us, I think, have ever had the sad chance to witness. And the resulting worldwide depression, the expected unprecedented famine, putting maybe 265 million or more people at its door, the rate of unemployment, the poverty, especially among people of color, the slow departing of the virus itself, and perhaps other viruses following in its wake, portend really an unimaginable world of human suffering that is not going to greatly improve soon. Ironically, if it's still decent to use that word, this tragedy of epic proportions also presents us, I think, both domestically and internationally, with what may be our best opportunity ever to win the kind of worker-based party, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist America that is essential, quite frankly, if life on Earth is to continue and people are to live decent lives. And why do I see opportunity in the midst of this crisis? Well, because America's capitalist government is on a daily basis demonstrating to our people that capitalism is unequipped by reason of structural intention, not to say human decency, to adequately and humanly respond to the crisis on a domestic level, to provide care for our people, to put the lives, if you will, of our people, working people, ahead of the ruling class's insatiable desire for more and more profit, and to get business reopened as soon as possible, no matter how many more lives that takes. On the international level, because of how poorly America has responded to the pandemic at home, the world now sees that the great American empire, well, it's naked. It has no clothes. That is, that it is exceptional only in how poorly, despite its great riches, it has handled this worldwide pandemic. Various articles in the New York Times of late have made the point that the world simply no longer sees the United States as the big kid on the block. Rather, as political scientists like Dominique Moissy, senior advisor at the Paris Institute of the Montan, says, quote, there will be more Asia in the world and less West following this pandemic. In short, this is the first global crisis in 100 years where no one is looking to the United States for leadership. In one article I read, historian Garton Ash, speaking of America, said, and I am quoting saying as much, history makes it clear that after a certain amount of time, all powerful nations decline. But sisters and brothers, I guess you've lost me. I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
It's just a 2-minute warning.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm in trouble. Well, sisters and brothers, a wounded lion, I was about to say, an empire on the skids and in decline is a dangerous beast. And so post-pandemic, capitalist America may be even more anxious to intervene in other nations' wars, to try to capture other nations' markets, to try to subdue the people of other nations for its own profits. And the American people may likely be told, certainly either by a Biden or a Trump, that in order to recover our jobs, to restore our place in the world, to have the resources that we need, we must intervene in these other foreign wars. We must seize these other markets. It's all for the good of the American people. That same lie that has been told over and over. Happily, there's a good deal of evidence that because of the lack of any credibility of capitalism's ability to deal with the issue domestically, that it will have even less efforts that it's had, less effect than it's had in recent years to work its well internationally. There'll be more protest movements back in the street, the pent-up energy to get out and scream no to this capitalist government, to scream yes on behalf of the workers of America and of the world, frankly, will be louder and clearer than ever. So it's an opportunity we cannot fail to seize upon.
Thank you. All right, the last speaker of the panel is Saladin Muhammad. Saladin, are you there? Okay. Yeah, I was just going to check. Okay. All right, so that's the end of the panel. We are running a little bit late on time, so I'd suggest limiting remarks to 1 minute, and if it's a question, then limiting the speaker's response to 1 minute. And Namdi, if you can maybe help me try to keep track of who wants to speak. I believe Desiree was first.
I wanted to know where Luis and Angel is doing his work for starters.
Hi, Desiree. Yes, so I'm based in Oakland. The legal agency where I work at does work across the Bay Area, in San Jose, San Francisco, up north, and in the Central Valley. I mentioned that I engineered the rapid response networks that are being used now across the country, the software and the kind of infrastructure for these neighborhood defense networks, both from dispatching to hotlines to attorney activation and legal observers that can be mobilized in real time when ICE shows up in any neighborhood. I'd be happy to coordinate more closely. There's obviously a lot of partners that are involved in this. And it's cutting edge work. It's at the front lines. But you know, through these networks, we've been able to learn, especially recently, where there's been really tense fights around private detention centers, like McFarland. McFarland just this last week, where local Latino Democrats voted with the private detention center to expand it by 350%. And McFarland being this rural community where immigrants mobilized in a way not seen like before. And the question again of independent policy has been posed there, because the people that betrayed that community wasn't the Republicans, it wasn't Trump, it was local Latino Democratic elected officials. And so this question is posed, I think, very immediately there and throughout the country.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other Okay, I was muted again, and I'm still red. So any other questions? I'm trying to keep an eye on the raising hands to speak out to.
If I can, I don't know if you can see a hand or not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed I'm listed as Myra on the screen, but I'm really CT Weber, and I'm with the Peace and Freedom Party here in California, and first got on the ballot in 1968 after about a year organizing drive, and we're the only, I guess, probably west of New England, the only ballot qualified Socialist Party in the United States. There's a Liberty Union up in New England. We're a non-sectarian feminist socialist party that's been on the ballot for roughly 50 years now. And we do have a presidential candidate in this election, or will have. And we probably think we know who will win the nomination at the convention because they've organized the most delegates. But anyway, I just wanted to say that we've been interested in independent political action since the 60s, and we're still looking for partners to help make this a truly non-sectarian socialist movement across the country. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
That's 1B with Weber, by the way.
Yeah.
Go up to the corner. CT, where you see the 3 dots in the corner of your frame, if you press on it, it should pull down and it should allow you to rename.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yes, so I guess
I don't think there was discussion for panel.
Sorry. Yes, I've just been informed the discussion comes after the second panel. So I would suggest we take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes. Yellow is a 2-minute warning, red is a 1-minute warning, and then may have to audibly ask you to finish your sentence. Okay, so second panel, Chris Silvera is the first speaker. Is Chris on? Okay. Okay. Seamus Cook?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on my phone because my computer's having problems. So first of all, I am a state employee for Oregon. I'm also a member of SCIU 503. I'm a chief steward there, and I'm an organizer for Portland Tenants United. I want to give a brief kind of breakdown on how I see things at the state level and some opportunities for independent action for politics. So first of all, Oregon is a one-party state, essentially. The Democrats have a supermajority, and they're pretty much uncontested for state power and at the city level in the big cities, our largest cities. And there is no, it's a very disciplined party here in Oregon. There's no room for left-wing populism. It's basically a blue dog Democrat state. And to make matters worse, our labor movement is weaker than our neighbors, California and Washington. We have a smaller working class. We have no large port. We have less history of big strikes, and no recent history that you've seen in like the Bay Area, for example, of strike action. So politically, we follow often California and Washington, and we say, me too, if there's anything good done there. So we have an extra, because we're weaker with labor, it means we have a stronger partnership with the Democrats. At the state level, there's 2 large unions, my own, SCIU, and the Oregon Education Association, that have a deep partnership with the state. And the SCIU's partnership may be the deepest in the country, which I could talk more about if I had more time, maybe in a Q&A. So the current supermajority was established 2 years ago, and that really rose expectations, and they were dashed quickly. And things came to a head when the Democrats attacked the public employee pensions. And the unions did not really fight this attack. And they were forced to put up some symbolic resistance once there was a rank and file objection, outcry. And this ultimately went through, but it opened the door for a DSA-backed candidate, Paige Kreisman, who's running against one of the incumbents who cut the pension. Paige is very progressive, identifies as a socialist and even communist. And what's interesting is a lot of the unions have supported her campaign, although it's unknown to what degree they've supported her in terms of financially, resource-wise. But really, it looks like the Democrats have weathered this storm with the pensions because there's been very little alternative against them. So a lot of the incumbents will win re-election with little problem. And also, upcoming, we can expect, as most states can, a lot of austerity cuts in the near future. And as of right now, there's no independent opposition to those cuts, which you can definitely expect coming to a state near you. So moving on to Portland politics, which Portland is the biggest city in Oregon. It's the motor force of state politics. And in recent years, politics here have been decided by housing. There's a major housing crisis in Portland, more so than most states, because Portland has been a destination city for migration. We have had often the highest rising rents in the country, us in Seattle, in recent years. And the Democrats were doing nothing about this whatsoever because they are the establishment in this state and city. And that opened the door for a small tenants union, which I'm an organizer for, which is Portland Tenants United, PTU for short. And in 2016, PTU backed one of our board members, Claudia Daly, who ran against the incumbent Democrat. And she was outspent 4-1, and she won in a landslide. And she ran on PTU's platform, which included rent control and other progressive laws for renters. And she used PTU after election to mobilize in support of her campaign goals and quickly passed the most progressive pro-renter legislation in the history of the city. And that was, I'll get to the lessons there in a second. But now PTU is supporting Margot Black, who is the current chair of PTU. She's our best organizer and has formed tenant unions across the city. And it's very possible she can win. So what PTU has done, PTU is an all-volunteer organization. It has exposed a huge gap in politics in the city. And most importantly, it exposed the weakness of the establishment, the Democrats. We are a non-staff organization. And lastly, a quick word on DSA in Portland. I'm also a member of DSA. And I'll say that, so DSA had endorsed Paige Kreisman, the person I mentioned earlier. There was a semi-public breakup there between those two. Paige felt that DSA had not offered her enough resources for her campaign. DSA also endorsed Albert Lee for House of Representatives, and he seems very unlikely to win that race. And so far in City Council, DSA is abstaining, which I think is a mistake. But I think the example of PTU shows that DSA, if they were to focus and prioritize, could be a major force in politics at the city and state level. Although they suffer from the same shortcomings as other chapters across the state, which is too many factions, too many issues they're fighting for concurrently, and the inability to prioritize on a couple campaigns. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I can't really see mine. Down below.
Sorry. Yeah, was Chris Silvera able to join? Last call. Okay. Donna DeWitt. Is Donna on?
Yes.
Excellent.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Everything's been inspiring, but I want to talk a little bit about South Carolina, which is a real challenge, to sort of set an example of politics at its worst. So there are 8 fusion states that have electoral fusion. That means for most of you, you understand that a candidate can run on more than one party line. South Carolina is one of those states. It's interesting because during the Revolutionary period, where 7 of the 9 wealthiest people in the new colonies lived, kind of gives you a precursor about the history of South Carolina. And the conservatives put forth an effort to do away with fusion voting in the 1900s. And it's interesting that South Carolina remains a fusion state. What that has meant for us is that the Working Families Party, who had received a ballot line at the same time of the Labor Party, South Carolina Labor Party, they have been able to run some candidates on a party line with the Democrats, and by 4 or 5% put those candidates over. The one thing that they never talk about is once they help to get them elected, they're no longer, they don't mention they were a Labor Party candidate, they're a Democrat. So fusion creates another situation for us in South Carolina. When we founded the Labor Party in 2006, and many of you that are on today were here, and I want to thank you for being here. We have now a Labor Party candidate. This is our 3rd candidate to run. We've been preserving the line, and we have Professor Willie Leggett, who is retired from South Carolina State, who will be running for a state house seat on the South Carolina Labor Party line in the fall. The difference is, and most of you know that, the Labor Party, there are no corporate contributions. It is a pure line. And for me, in trying to keep this line, which we've done, is that we can look at things like the labor and communities for independent politics to look at why we should have a pure line. If you look at the issues versus the candidates, it builds coalitions, and to me that's important. So many times the parties that we've had want to just run a candidate, but we have to be able to identify the issues. And I think one of the things that, that we saw in examples of this was during the 2008 elections, where families came together from the Democrats and the Republicans around the issue of immigration and children being taken from their families. So in those states, like in California and Texas and some of the border states, they voted for candidates that would support them. Another example locally, if you look at our state in Congressional District 1, the Democrats were able to take that back from Republican hands because the young guy that ran as a Democrat was an environmentalist. And it made a difference to people along the coast to have an environmentalist run. So we were able to do that. And I think when we look at the issues and if we developing a new party, the issues have to come up front. And that's what we can do with the Labor and Communities for Independent Politics, is in your area, no matter what the issue is, you'll have an opportunity to run the candidates on the lines where you feel they're best representing the issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Ajamu Baraka? I don't know. I looked through. There's still quite a few Maya Shones, so if people want to change their name. Okay.
I'm on. I'm here.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
I'm under my new name, Maya.
Right.
Well, comrades, I would really like to thank you for inviting me to take part in this very important conversation. Building an independent Labor Party is both timely and historically necessary, of course. This conversation, moving us in that direction, is important. It's important that we are able to begin to identify not only what should be the correct analysis for why we need a party, but to begin to identify the obstacles that might be presented to try to undermine the success in building an independent left political party in the US. Very quickly, as some of you may know, I am the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. The Black Alliance for Peace is a relatively new formation. We just hit 3 years on April the 4th. It is a formation that is committed to building a militant, anti-war, anti-imperialist formation among African Americans, grounded in the objective needs of the working class. So it is a working class-oriented formation. And we are committed to building this formation because we understand that basically the issue of the working class and the issue of the working class as it relates to war and militarism is in fact a class issue. And so we hope that as we go down the road in building this new party, that we avoid the mistakes that others have made in the US in attempting to build a progressive formation while simultaneously marginalizing the issues of imperialism. The other thing, of course, that I've been involved in, as some know, is the Green Party. Recently as the vice presidential candidate in 2016. And from that experience, I've had a chance to see firsthand both the possibilities and difficulties of developing a third party or an alternative party in this country. Of course, the Green Party is not yet a socialist or worker-based party, even though there are elements in the party that have that aspiration. In fact, part of how we framed the campaign in 2016, myself in particular, was we saw this campaign as a campaign to build independent power from the bottom up. And that orientation is so vitally important, my friends, because you know, if you understand the challenges of today in terms of building dual power, having a critical perspective on how we strategically interface with the electoral process, you understand that we can't ignore, as people on this call understand, we can't ignore the electoral arena. When you have a situation where we have 39,000 municipal governments, 13,000 individual school districts, and 500,000 electoral spaces on the local and state level, that bottom-up process of capturing so many spaces that are there for the taking is vitally important. In fact, it's primary in my opinion. However, we don't want this to just be an electoral party. As a number of people already touched on, we have to have a presence in the broader social movements, in the issues that are impacting labor and the working class in general, and be present as we are building this party, a membership-based, independent, dues-paying party. So this process, I think, is vitally important. This connection between independent labor parties and community-based parties is important. Reminding ourselves that we have to build a party, not just an electoral machine that mirrors what the Republicans and the Democrats do. And reminding ourselves, too, that we have to connect the issue of imperialism and any of the configurations that we build and in the ideological orientation of this formation. I think that I'm getting close to my time, so I will begin to leave it there and say that we want to support this process, and we are here all the way. I hope that we can have some more conversations regarding how we move strategically in building this new reality. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Galen Ash.
Good afternoon, folks. Hope you're all doing well. So yeah, thank you for the time to speak. I'm working on a project called the Labor Slate with Gerard Ram, who's also on the call. So we're going to be splitting the time here. So I'm just going to share my screen here for a second. So hope you can see this. So talking about the Labor Slate, which we're building a coalition of labor unions in the Bay Area to run labor leaders for local office, boards and commissions, school boards, city councils. And then we're really focused on flipping electoral politics on its head. So historically in the United States, it's been a candidate-centric process. People who are ambitious and megalomaniac decide that they're the best people to run. They go around shopping for endorsements from labor, and then they get into office. There's no accountability because they control their own organization and their funding stream. So we're really trying to move towards a structure-based model. We're building an organization, a coalition of labor unions, each of which pay per capita dues to the organization, have a democratic vote over the platform, democratically decide who these candidates are going to be, and really are able to hold those folks accountable once they get into office, because if they vote against the platform, they get deselected, right? And we run somebody against them the next time around. It also means that we're not getting the most ambitious people, but we're actually getting real leaders that have a history and a track record of moving their coworkers to action and being able to fight. So we've looked at the failure of the US left historically. There's really this focus on bearing witness, not a real focus on building power and actually winning power. And particularly the failure of the Labor Party in the 1990s focused on really high level races, and we need to build from the ground up, from the real, from the bottom level of electoral politics. So we've been doing a lot of research focused on identifying key districts that are working class districts and doing a lot of organizing to bring local unions in and identify the issues they care about, identify the leaders within their locals and run those folks for office. And it's really about nominating candidates rather than simply endorsing candidates who are already running, and holding them to a democratically decided platform with a mandate of those local unions. And we believe that that unions are the largest, examples, institutional examples of the working class, so they need to be the foundation. I'm going to hand it over to Gerard to talk about the next piece.
Yeah, so I really appreciate Jamit's comment about the fact that there are hundreds and thousands of seats out there that exist at the local political level, and that's what we are trying to build by engaging kind of local labor leaders. So we've identified 134 seats up for election in 2020 alone in the Bay Area. These include races for school boards, city councils, county commissions, other special districts. There's over 210 union locals based in the Bay Area, so that's a big basis on which to draw. And in addition to that, there's probably about 400 committee seats, advisory committee seats, appointees. There's a lot of places to actually make movement and put labor leaders in power in local governance. So some of the target cities we've identified: Daly City, East Palo Alto, Hayward, Martinez, Redwood City, San Leandro, Berkeley, South San Francisco, and Vallejo. And our research committee has actually put in a lot of effort into, checking out voter populations, looking through demographic information, looking at past races, how many people have voted, what the actual numbers and have looked like for those. Here's one example of the Hayward Unified School District from 2016. This was the at-large general election. You can see that, the total votes cast about just around 100,000 votes total, and those who won with around 3,000 votes. So these are low-level, kind of local, winnable races, but they are essential for our model and how to kind of build a ground-up structure for, labor control and labor power in local governance and creating the seeds of the Labor Party. The last thing we're looking at is this is demographic data on income inequality across the Bay Area. So you can see red areas are areas of higher poverty, blue areas higher wealth. And so we're really looking at districts and areas, committees, commissions, appointments in areas with high working class demographic data. So these are just some maps to kind of show that and outline that. So this is kind of what we've been building. And, you know, Galen and I are both union organizers, union members. Everyone who's kind of been participating in the research and organizing committee are also union members. And one thing that's been really powerful and motivating for us is we all recognize how local politics and local governance has an impact on working class movements and the oppression, the disenfranchisement of working class people. So that's the model.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Next speaker, Khalid Rahim. Oh, and if you want, yeah, still sharing screen.
Sorry.
Thank you. Khalid?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you, Namdi. Thank you all. Good to see a familiar face and hear the familiar voice of Brother Ujima Baraka as well in this excellent presentation and analysis and suggestions. My name is Khalid Rahim. I'm the founder and the chairperson for New African Independence Party. We're an independent Black political party. We started in 2012. We became activated in 2014. We're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is in the southwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania. The county is Allegheny. Pittsburgh is the county seat. We definitely support the development of an independent workers or labor party. We think it's about time. We also have some questions and we have some concerns about the development of such a party and about the use of electoral politics in general. Just a few things that we wanted to point out is that while we support the development of an independent labor party, we also support the right as well as the legitimacy of Black people and other people of color, especially those who have been the victims of national oppression and exploitation, to form their independent formations in their own right. So the formation of an independent labor party would not preclude the continued development of independent Black political parties and formations, such as our party, such as Ujima People's Progress Party, and so forth and so on. The political reality is that the parties have, in our humble opinion, the parties have to have a support for self-determination when it comes to the Black community and other oppressed communities as well. We have to be able to exercise that right and determine how we need to proceed and determine what is in our own best collective interest. The political reality for us as far as dealing with electoral politics as a tool to pursue some type of freedom and liberation for our communities is that for us, we see one of the greatest structural obstacles or organizational obstacles to be the Democratic Party itself. Someone earlier remarked that if you want to kill something, send it to the Democratic Party. That's absolutely correct. When you talk about movements, when you talk about issues, the Democratic Party has always found ways historically to co-opt movements, to co-opt issues, and to basically kill them as any effective means to increase the quality of life for poor people, for low-income people, and for the working class in general. So there's no argument about that. For us, one of the things that moved us to the point of recognizing how important it was for us to have our own political party is that we looked around and we noticed that when we looked at the major urban centers around the country that had sizable Black populations and brown populations, that for decades, most of those urban centers had been managed not by the Republican Party, but by the Democratic Party itself. We looked at Philadelphia, we looked at Pittsburgh, we looked at New York, Detroit, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, Cleveland. And for decades, most of the power locally had been held by the Democratic Party, the mayors, the city councils, the county executives, and so forth and so on. We noticed there was some fluctuation, there would be some differences when we looked at the state power. We would have situations where the state legislature might be predominantly Republican, or it could be just the reverse. You would have a Republican governor with a predominantly Democratic legislature. But on the local level, most of the power was being wielded by the agents and by the representatives of the Democratic Party. And they developed this serious, what we would define as a neo-colonial class. And we see ourselves as Black people as being some type of colony. And we saw them as being this neo-colonial master that basically kept the vast majority of Black folks in check because they look like us, because we played ball with them. We went to school with them. Some of them were our close family members and friends. But now they were in a position to basically represent the interests of capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy. So we thought it was time to move on. It's time to move on from the Democratic Party. We also noticed that there was a disproportionate number of Black people who fed into every negative demographic when it came to metrics of oppression, whether it was unemployment, underemployment, arrest, murder, police violence, so forth and so on. Again, all of this during the reign or during the regime of the Democratic Party on a local level. Now, one of the things that we recognize is that, and this is something for a lot of the folks who are part of the labor movement, who are also union representatives, not just organizers in general. But what we notice in places like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and elsewhere is a collusion and collaboration between the politicians, the union bureaucrats, as well as developers when it comes to issues like gentrification. And so how do we—
Closing statements, please. Closing statements.
Yes. And so how do we address these type of issues of collusion between union, bureaucrats, developers, as well as neo-colonial politicians? And as we move to develop and put together this labor-based party or this labor party, what will be its agenda relative to the aspirations of Black freedom and self-determination? Thank you.
Thank you. So Nandi, I guess that we don't have a video. Was that okay, so Alan is next.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And I want to just greet everybody who's been on the call. It's really quite an honor to be among all of you. I want to address a number of questions that have come up. First, we don't want to be a marginal third party. That's an issue. Building from the bottom up, building labor and community alliances, building up from the bottom will create the position where we're not minority, marginal, but we're going to become the second party because the bosses have two parties. They're one party, it's the one big property party. And so if we view that and keep that conception in mind, wanting to make greater inroads into the labor movement, beginning from the rank and file, we won't view ourselves as just a small little pressure group organization. Second, any labor-based political party worth its salt has to, in my opinion, support the right of self-determination of Black and Latino self-organization and self-determination. Otherwise, it's not representing the interests not only of working class people, but of all the oppressed, of all the nationally oppressed. And I think that the call today, reflects our commitment to that struggle with Latino and with the Black struggle foremost. It's a question of, as Nancy Wilforth said, of building trust. Independent Black organization, Black working class organization is a key component. And it's always going to be a matter of working, coordinating, creating structures of trust, ultimately through a process of work and respect, showing that we are committed. And there's legitimate reasons for Black activists to be wary of even the most progressive-minded white organizations, because for so many years, there's been betrayals. So trust is going to be essential, and that's a trust that's built over a process of coordination and local labor and community coalitions. And I think in that sense, the efforts for a labor slate are important in the Bay Area. But if that is to be a successful venture, it has to move toward reaching out to the Black, especially Black majority in Oakland and elsewhere, to build that coalition and that ability to lay the groundwork step by step for an independent party. We've learned from the Labor Party experience that you don't start from the top down. There was concerns that we would be running candidates that would be undermining the Democratic Party, and a lot of the labor officials at the top didn't want to run any candidates at all, even locally, out of fear that they would become, quote, spoilers. That only happens when these movements don't have a real base to counter it. The Labor Party that we formed in the 1990s had many great points, and it developed a very important platform, in my opinion. But in relation to the Black struggle, when Comrade Saladin Mohammed asked and raised the struggle that was adopted at a convention to free Mumia Abu Jamal, was told after that we have to put that on hold because we don't want to lose our trade union allies in this or that organization. I'm not going to mention names at this point. And that was a betrayal of a mandate of a convention and of the trust that's needed to build, because that was an issue of self-determination. We need to build examples of success and running candidates locally and building those coalitions, using the different platforms that may be available to us to do this, nonpartisan and other. Selecting the candidates is important, but rooting them in the struggle, like Brother Ajamu Comrade Ajamu just mentioned, it's not just a question of candidates, it's a question of rooting this effort in supporting and building the resistance that Luis Angel was talking about. Very important of these neighborhood committees of the undocumented or of the immigrant workers and youth. Rooting it in every single struggle, and they're going to be new, very important struggles arising after the crisis. We're going to be asked to pay for the debt and the crisis that is ensuing as a result of the pandemic. We are going to have, it's already beginning, countless attacks on our rights, and the fightbacks are going to be multiple, and there are going to be a lot of attempts to co-opt us. Already Trump is calling on the Democrats and others to join these committees for the recovery, and our labor officials are going to be part of that. And we have to say we're not at the table to make cuts and to co-author and to co-manage the crisis with these with the imperialists. And finally, the fight against imperialism is crucial. If that's not a part of our effort, we're not worth the name of independent labor party, labor-based party. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's all the speakers for panel 2. Now is the discussion. We suggest, I guess, we have until 4:25, so just over 15 minutes. So if people could keep their comments to 2 minutes, we can give a 1 minute. We just go right to red for 1 minute. And please keep to time so everyone can get a chance to speak. So let's keep an eye on the chat. You can raise your hand in the participants. Oh, I see Bill, Loomer, and Jim. So let's start there, and then it'd be easier if you'd send a chat or put your hand up in the participants, since I can't see everyone at the same time.
Okay.
So
well,
Bill?
I just wanted to go back to extend some remarks that Seamus wasn't able to make about Margot Black's campaign. You know, I've been following it from San Francisco. Thanks, Seamus, for sending all of the information. But I watched like a debate where there was 4 candidates running for the same seat. Margot was one of them, and the moderator asked, well, given the, the economic crisis, et cetera, what kind of areas do you think you would advise making cuts, austerity cuts? And Margot Black said, unlike everyone else, I'm not for making cuts. I'm for expanding services, and I'd pay for them by taxing the rich. And that message resonates. And so you got a woman that's running for office that's militant, and she's been that way for years, and she's won these incredible endorsements from the housing activists in Portland. And so running on these kind of local demands and issues with that kind of a anti-austerity perspective is just what the labor movement seems to be in certain places gravitating towards, especially public sector workers.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next I had Jim. You're on mute. You got to unmute.
Fine, like you can hear me now. You can
Yes.
hear me now? Yeah.
Yes,
good.
we can.
I agree with everything Bill just said, and I was also in total agreement with what Alan Benjamin said. And but the question I have overarching all of this is the following. I'm thrilled that we're going to be running local candidates. I think that's exactly what we ought to be doing. But we're running them in a presidential election year. And the question is going to be asked of all of those local candidates, who do you support for president? I don't think it's going to be possible to avoid answering that question. And I think, so I have lots of things I could say about that, but I'm more interested in hearing how those of you that have been much more deeply involved and thoughtful about this than I have been suggest the candidates. Let's say I was a candidate here in LA. How would you suggest I answer that question? Because I think how we answered is not only going to be critical for the local campaign candidate, it's going to be critical for the reputation of our party and our party efforts.
Ujima.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that's a important question, but I think it leads to another question, and that is, my understanding that this effort is an effort to build a party, and that is more than a notion, especially when one reminds oneself of the difficulties of even getting access and getting these lines in these various states to in fact run candidates. I don't think that we're going to see a bunch of that activity taking place here in 2020. So it seems to me that what this effort is really about is the longer term objective of building this independent labor party. But I think the political question that Jim is raising is something that will come up even in the preliminary stages of people finding out about this effort and trying to get a sense of where this motion is actually going and its relationship to the Democrats and to the issue of Trump and all of that. So this is a question that probably does need to be addressed. Over.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have Galen on the queue, but Gabriel P has a check mark in. Or is that you trying to raise your hand? Okay, so Galen, and then I saw, was that Alan and then Jack? Okay, that'll be the order for now. Go ahead, Galen.
Yeah, thank you. I think we really need to look to other countries and the way that left-wing parties try and build and try and advance their agenda to every extent possible that they can in all the races that they can actually contest, and be realistic about the races that they can't contest. Right, we're not going to win the presidency, and similarly in countries that also have presidential systems, smaller left-wing parties join coalitions to advance the best possible candidate that they can. Right. So I think until we're at a stage where we can actually run for Senate and win, or run for president and win, we have to say we are fighting to get our agenda passed at every level we can, and at the level we can't, we're going to endorse whatever candidate is going to do the best that it can for working class people, with all the flaws that we acknowledge that they will bring.
Okay, so we have Alan, then Jack, then Namdi. I lost my screen. Go ahead.
To address the question that Jim poses, I think that speaking for the organizers of this meeting, what we've concluded is that we are not going to be endorsing any candidates at this time. What we're trying to do is build, as Ajamu says, the longer term and building, just laying the groundwork. But essential to our message is no support for Democrats or Republicans. If you cannot say that, you're not really pointing folks in the direction of independent politics. You can tell folks, vote socialist, vote independent, vote for the working class, but we're not in the business of supporting Democrats or Republicans. And I thought that it was important in looking at I think it was the Constitution for the labor slate, that issue of not supporting Democrats and Republicans was key. And it's going to be vital, because if we build something independently from the bottom up and at the same time give a message, well, we support this or that lesser evil Democrat, we're creating a confusion. What we can say is we're not in the position yet. We're building up to the point where we can run independent candidates at a higher level.
Okay, we have Jack, then Namdi.
Yeah, just two brief points here. You know, as a union organizer and local president for 15 years, I found it was very, very effective when you're trying to bring people together to anticipate the future and to explain what's going to happen and how we would respond to it. And, you know, as bad as the condition is today, it's about to get much worse, probably even beyond some of your imagination. The economic crisis is going to be worse. Right now, the Federal Reserve's thrown $9 trillion to preemptively bail out the banks. It's not for sure that it's going to be able to do that. The defaults coming may be so great that it can't even contain that. Job recovery is not going to happen. It's going to take years for jobs to recover. There's going to be relapses. There's going to be a tax on Social Security, education, and other spending right after the election. So the economic crisis is going to get worse. The health crisis is probably going to get worse. There's never been a virus without second and third waves. The political crisis is going to get much worse. It's going to deepen. Attack on civil rights and democratic rights. Trump is going to leverage this crisis to try to win, and if he doesn't win, it's likely he's going to refuse to step down. That's a real possible scenario.
Jack, thank you. Your last closing statement. Last closing.
Okay. Well, the only question I think is the organizational question before us. How do you build this organization, this group, directly or by affiliations? How do you participate with these young guys in the labor slate to run candidates? And how do you plan a strategy and tactics to have a founding convention for this new party right after the elections? What's the strategy and tactics to do that? You've got to plan for that. You can't wait until it's over and then try to do it. You got to start telling people that, look, it's either candidate wins, Democrat, Republicans, the crisis is going to go on and it's going to get deeper. How do we convince people that a new organization is necessary and we have a plan for doing it? And bringing people together from the bottom up, as Alan said, people leading real movements, not intellectuals declaring a party. But how do you plan and tell people the strategy and the tactics for doing that and giving them hope? You see, that's the only thing that's missing today. It's hope that there's an alternative that people can turn to that's realistic. But you got to have a plan for that, I believe, between now and then.
Thank you. So we have Namdi, Millie, and then Galen.
Yeah, Jack, I don't know if I'll speak to that directly. I don't think that is something that we had anticipated doing in that short time frame, because I think it is a legitimate question that you ask. I think it also takes more than just a small group of people to answer it. What I do want to say is that part of the discussion that people are having about running local candidates and being able to possibly deal with when people ask you about these national elections. I think we can't underestimate the need to build on the ground real political organization, real capacity, right? To be really engrossed in building institutions of working class power, to be a part of real resistance struggles, so that there's a real organic relationship between who we decide to run as candidates and who the people themselves respect in the community. I think once there's a level of respect that has been earned from the organizers and from the organizations that we build, that some of those questions won't even exist, because people will have a sense of who these organizers are. I think we've given too much to the electoral process and have forgotten that we still need to build real worker power, real strength on the ground to represent our interests, regardless of whether we win an election or not.
Can I respond to that or no?
I could put you back on the queue, but I think we should just stick to the queue. I'll put you back on. I saw was that there's too many people named Maya still, but Millie, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to Galen's comment about who we support above the local level. But let's be honest, people are going to vote lesser evil. That's what they're going to do. And you can't blame them if there aren't alternatives to them to vote for. But it's not our job to have to support those people. You know, if we're dealing with things at the local level, we focus on that. However people want to vote above that level, that's their own conscience and their own business. But I agree that it would be very, it'd be very unfortunate for any of us to, as an organization in particular, to support people who are not independent. Because then we would be, doing something that is not what we're saying. We wouldn't be walking our talk. Thank you.
Okay, so now on the queue, I have Galen, Michal, Desiree, and then Jack.
I wasn't on the queue. Sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
You raised your hand. Sorry.
You
Maybe you
have,
didn't. Okay, sorry. That was Galen who said that, so that'll be Michal.
Hey, yeah, I think a couple of quick things. Any sort of success in this area that we want to construct is going to have to be based off of coalitions. We're going to have to look at cities, districts where there's fertile ground and opportunity to do this, much like in the way that, bad example, but the Republicans, for example, have a coalition of gun rights, anti-abortion, racist, that kind of thing. We need a coalition of our own type of the left on this side. And I think in order to do that, we're going to need proper infrastructure, that is media and social media and all types of outreach established, so that we can spread a wider message about what we're trying to do, so that we can make comment on things that are happening daily, so that we're seen by people. And I think if we do that and stick to the goal that I see in the meantime, which is to build interest around the topic of independent politics and eventually an independent party for the working class.
Okay, sorry, Desiree, I'd forgotten. You're next, then Jack, and I think we have just 2 minutes left in this discussion. So
you have me on your list.
Can you send me a message? Because I don't know who's talking.
I did send a message, but
oh, sorry. Oh, okay, I'll check. Yes. Okay, you'll be then after Jack. All right. Sorry, Desiree.
And what Namdi has said. But I also believe that momentum is everything for the most part when in movements. And if there's one thing I've learned from my father, is that momentum is very key. And right now we have some serious momentum to work with. Right. Both parties. And they're like almost in limbo. They're independent, they're almost in limbo. But we're really running out of time, and that's what our strong message is. When we launch, we need to indicate we are running out of time. This is the change that we have to take now, the course we have to take now. And if we all come out collectively this way through our coalitions and we run these candidates with a message that's very striking this way, we are going to get the numbers. When you look at the statistics and the numbers, people are exiting so fast right now. The Democratic Party is in a panic right now, okay? I know because I infiltrated it here in my county, and I was very clear about it. I'm only here to infiltrate you. And they didn't like it, but I did. We did. We changed the dynamics here in Yolo. And so my point is that when we come out, we have to use those connecting pieces.
Hey, Desiree, closing comment. We're trying to stay.
And why we have run out of time, because people are scared, but they want to vote differently.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Jack and then CT.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up comment here. You know, my only point was that, as Desiree says, the conditions are there and they're about to get worse, much worse. And one-on-one building, you know, trust and so forth, that's all true. There's nothing wrong with that. But anticipating the depth and the speed of this crisis, political and economic, which is accelerating, I think is the condition in which you have to then develop your strategy and how you're going to try to build a party here. And the organization question means, what role is this group going to play in growing itself among progressives and play in trying to form coalitions locally, not just to run for offices, that's important, but for other struggles? What struggles do you intervene with? And how are you going to do that? What's your guidelines? And I don't think it's premature, really, in trying to develop a strategy for trying to bring coalitions together after the election. Because no matter who wins that election, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse if Trump wins, and it's going to get worse if the Democrats win, because they're going to go after us as well and cut Social Security and cut education and everything. So the crisis is not going to end in November. It's going to get worse, and people are going to be desperate for some sort of organization. And what role is this group going to play in trying to build that organization and a founding convention, either regionally, a set of them, or nationally, of groups that are going to mobilize between now and then? That's the only question on the agenda, I think.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, CT's last speaker before the next panel.
Let me just say that, you know, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit. There has to be something called pre-party organizing, I think. What that means is you have to make the conditions such that we can start off as winning something. And the only way I think that we can do that is through things like proportional representation. We have to start using the ballot access that we have to qualify initiatives where we can go forward, qualify initiatives for things that will further our movement, whether it be proportional representation, some type of ranked choice voting, some type of equal public funding of campaigns. We have to make those things available to us, and then we have to level that playing field. The Democrats, Republicans are the one who make the rules for how elections will run. And I realize that we're more than just about elections, but elections is one of the strategies that we're using. And if we want to use it, we want to make sure that we can use it in such a way that we can start off by winning. And you can only do that with something like proportional representation. So those are kind of the things that are pre-party organizing. I think we really got to get serious. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff isn't going to come about, in my opinion. That's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, that leads, the next panel is next organizing steps. We have Namdi and Maya. Each will be given 7 minutes. So I'll do it again, a 2-minute warning and a 1 minute. So yellow will be 2 and 1 will be red.
And sadly, I'd be sorry to interrupt. It's been wonderful, but something, I prearranged something I can't get out of. I must now leave this far. thank you. It's been wonderful, and I hope to keep working with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim, and Desiree as well. Okay, so Namdi, want to kick it off?
Yeah. So some of the efforts that we were undertaking here to have this discussion, the timing was going to be in July. It was going to be right after, well, excuse me, actually the initial timing was going to be at the end of July in early August, right after the Democratic National Convention. When we obviously started this discussion, we anticipated that there would probably be some, for lack of a better term, shenanigans at the National Convention to deal with Bernie Sanders, but the shenanigans has already taken place. And the question of even there being a convention there is, I don't even know if that is even still on the table for them. For us, the discussion obviously still needs to be taken. And I've taken in a lot of the discussions, even the recent one Jack that made. I think there is a lot of stuff that is on the table. There are some immediate tasks that need to be undertaken. There's some midterm and some long-range discussions that need to happen. And I think what's important is that in this discussion here, it was called a planning discussion, right? Just to kind of lay some foundations for what needs to be done and needs to be talked about. It's not for us to dictate to organizers all over the country what we think the best idea is. We're sharing our ideas. I think obviously the work to have a convention requires that there needs to be some kind of follow-up. There needs to be some subcommittees pulled together that kind of takes some of these really big level issues and starts to break them apart. I think there are going to be opportunities to take advantage of the current electoral cycle, and there's going to obviously be work that has to be done that happens right afterwards and short term, right? Just here, and we're talking about the logistics of doing an event. Again, we don't know if it's going to be possible to do a physical discussion. Obviously, we would love to be able to meet many of your comrades in person. We had a facility that we thought would be accessible and that would have space for everyone to be comfortable. And we don't know if that's going to be available, obviously, given the situation. And even still, unless we push out, planning is legitimate, right? You can't ask people to turn on a month or two to make something of this scale happen. So there's got to be some planning as far as logistics happening. We can always expand this on a social media platform as far as this arena. We can even have more spaces available. We can have breakout rooms to kind of really, tailor some of these discussions so that expertise can kind of really come out. I think, again, also, even though we've had good participation on this call from people from the Latino and from the African liberation movement, it is obviously not as extensive as we think it should be. I think there needs to be a much more deeper outreach to forces in oppressed communities to have their say, to be able to organize their ideas. I think there might even need to be some mini discussions, many conventions of Black and brown people to discuss amongst themselves some kind of formulation that we would like to pull together. So there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. I would put forward that we come up with some list of committees out of this as part of this discussion, that we identify some time frames of getting some, not only working groups, but reports back from those working groups. I think there's a lot of work to be done coming off of this, and I hope people don't feel that this, just because we've had a discussion, that we've either solved it all or we don't have any answers. I think the work to kind of put the real nuts and bolts together is what we're asking for. It's what I'm asking for, and there's definitely a lot more work to be done. So I'll add that contribution there. I don't want to take up all the time. I think there should be some discussion afterwards. And if I miss some points, I'm pretty sure someone asking me a question or some other comrades will bring those points up as well.
Okay, thank you, Namdi. All right, Maya, the real Maya, please. Whoops. So yeah, 7 minutes, 2 and 1 minute warning.
Okay, so the different chats and so forth have not been from me there, so I don't know. People will have to identify yourselves. So this has been one of an incredibly rich. I'm usually a face-to-face person, tactile, and like to see people and be in the same room as those many of you who've been impressed by the logistics and the willingness of all of us to accept this format. And also some of your presentations have moved me to tears and created the true reality of what is going on. And many of us, most of us, have been at this for half a century, some of us for even longer than half a century. And I don't see exactly, there are going to be tough times coming. As a former economist, I can give you chapter and verse about all the attacks that are underway. For instance, if you look at the New York Times today, it notes that in the so-called stimulus bill, a good part that was acceded to by the Democrats are major tax cuts for people who earn over $500,000 a year and for large corporations like Coca-Cola. So we know who's going to pay for all this. No tax money. It's going to be, as Jack said, increasing attacks on the working class. But what I see happening during all of this, whether it's in the United States or internationally, is the mobilization, whether it's nurses on the picket lines outside the hospitals in New York, or the Amazon workers who had their sick out, or even in what you saw in Poland, where in the legislature they've been trying to pass anti-abortion legislation. People had women throughout the country had social distancing demonstrations. This is going on everywhere. And when Luis describes the Rapid Response Network and the example of McFarland, we see within there the building blocks for how to create a real party. So it seems that we all share a common goal, which is a working class party rooted in labor and communities of the oppressed. That's a given among us. And as Nnamdi said, it's how do we go about it? I also see that we have a strategy. This is what we've been talking about in Labor and Community for an Independent Party. It's what the Labor Fight Back Network was talking about for many years. And in effect, it's what we wanted to come out of the important Labor Party effort of the 1990s. We have a strategy, and that strategy is based upon all the individual and collective years of experience that everyone in this group has from organizing in our workplace, our communities, and political organizations. And that is, nothing can ever happen if you don't have a strong foundation of the building blocks. That's the building block in your workplace. That's how you organize a union. You're not coming from the top down. You're organizing in your workplace. And that's the same thing in community. When Seamus was talking about the rent control effort, it's absolutely fabulous. There you had the communities organizing, and they were able to launch a candidate. So it's these local labor and community coalitions. You have to have that intersection. If you have just labor or you have just community, you're dividing the working class. We're all in the working class, and we have many different representations, whether it's from the workplace in our unions or through rent coalitions or through immigrant communities. All these fightbacks, we're all representative organizations of the working class, and we need to bring us all together as the working class to have a real class struggle instrument in the political arena. And it's then that when you have these local labor and community coalitions, that they can then come together in state assemblies, where again, as we do in our unions and other organizations, we have everyone involved, they pick their delegates, they go to delegate assemblies, and then we can build state by state and have these organizations strengthened with a national organization. It can't come from the top with the national organization and a small group of people deciding this is the structure. It has to be those building blocks, the same building blocks we've used, all of us, whether it was the civil rights movement, whether it's our union movement, whether it's, I have to say this is even in religious communities, churches. They get people involved and engaged in the local community. So it isn't a novel strategy. I think what we're doing is to state the obvious. We're doing what all of us know how to do so well. And it's a matter of bringing all our efforts together and to actually engage in the political process. And that's where, as people have said over and again, it has to be independent. It can't be the lesser evil. It's not the Friends of Labor. The Friends of Labor stab you in the back time and again. It's also not, we're not out to have just electoral coalitions, where, as someone so aptly said and remarked, where you have a career politician. People have endorsed a candidate. That candidate even might be a friend of labor, a friend of the community, but we all know what happens as they work their way up from whether it's a school board or a district election, then there's a state legislature, and all of a sudden they have to be making their deals with the one big property party because they've disconnected from the community. And I think the point was made early on, you can never disconnect. It has to be that whoever is running is integrated in the struggles. And that's why it's also important, and this was actually something that developed long ago with the original Socialist Party of the Eugene Debs. You cannot just run electoral politics. You have to be involved in the struggles, the day-to-day struggles of your community. And it's only with those struggles that you can actually build and move forward. So we also have the second objective. I'm sorry, my time's up?
Yeah, your time is up.
Is my time up?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the second objective, and this was referred to, okay, I just want to say, bring it back
That's
to
not what time
Nancy
up means,
talked
Maya.
about the AFL-CIO. Okay.
Here, we have 5 minutes for discussion, so we can, let's go ahead and open a brief discussion. I would suggest 1 minute comments. Does anyone want to jump on? All right, I see Alan. I'll start with Alan. Go ahead. Alan, you're muted.
I had touched on is important. We can't jump stages here in the process of building something that requires trust and requires rooting us in the community. There's an urgency, yes, a big urgency, and Jack is not wrong to point out the fact that people are going to be looking for alternatives. But we can't be a fly-by-night organization. We need to be, we need to form an organizing committee, an expanded organizing committee out of today's meeting, and I'm hoping that a lot of people on the calls will agree to join an expanded organizing committee, perhaps meet again as an organizing committee as we're doing now between now and our planned meeting in July. Give ourselves a bulletin that we can exchange information or just do it online, have a chat group, but an organizing committee that moves this process forward so that when we meet, either in a new conference, a broad conference or not, we can be an expanded group and lay the groundwork step by step. It's not going to happen overnight. Yes, urgency. We have to be better organized, but also be cognizant of the fact that we need to build these alliances and trust.
Thank you. Did I see a hand? Bill, and then anyone? Bill, and then Clarence.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just on like next steps. You know, we should definitely form that committee coming out of this meeting, and one of the things that we should take up is reaching out to other groups in other cities, you know, so that we can make the contacts. It's like here in the Bay Area, you know, Alan and I have been involved in the labor movement here for 35 years or more, and we just Alan stumbled upon the labor slate. just recently. And so there, you can see, we've heard that there are other cities where groups have been mobilized, and we've got to contact them and tell them about this organization that we're building and see if we can't get them to be part of it. We've got to recruit. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Clarence, then Khalid.
Yeah, I'd like to just elaborate a little bit on what Maya had mentioned in terms of different groups connecting the struggles together. I had mentioned earlier that I was involved in, and still am involved in the struggle to keep the port from being privatized by John Fisher. One of the things that struggle has revealed is that John Fisher is a major funder for charter schools. And so he also wants to build 3,000 condominium units. So the issue of housing, the issue of gentrification, the issue of charter schools are all connected. And so when these groups that are engaged in various arduous struggles, but they're doing it independent, we do need to connect. And I think that's a very, very important point that Maya has raised.
Thank you. Khalid?
Yes, I just want to reemphasize how important I do believe it's going to be to, as we move forward in organizing this particular National Labor Party, that our analysis reflects the historical reality and the current reality of a society that is not just structured based on class, but it's definitely structured, deeply structured, based on the issue of race. And as we move forward, we have to recognize that as an integral component into what this party is going to look like and whose interests this party is going to serve. The United States of America is not a all-white society, and it never has been, and it probably never will be. And so as we move forward to organize this particular Labor Party, we must consider the different components and pockets throughout the working class and throughout the poor that have a lot of serious issues around racism and white supremacy connected to economic injustice and exploitation. And so we have to make sure that the platform that we all agree upon in the final analysis reflects that type of history and that type of social reality. If not, we're going to alienate folks that we don't necessarily need to alienate. We just need to make sure that the analysis is correct, so the structure reflects that correct type of analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namdi?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to also briefly add the component to the Black liberation work as well. Is that in my opening, I mentioned that in cities like Baltimore and in many cities that you have a concentration, right, of Black working class people. You have a concentration of the Democratic Party being very influential. But you also have all these real contradictions, right, that have nothing to do with election time, but all the poverty, all the police brutality, gentrification. The sister Annie Chambers came on, the food deserts. These are real struggles, right? And sometimes you're looking at a community that is like so pushed back that even electoral politics does not even have a legitimacy, right, in that work. And that we have to also be a party that speaks to people's struggles to live, especially oppressed people, right? Because the kind of oppression that Black people suffer is a notch higher than what the average worker experiences, right? And that we have to recognize that, and we have to recognize that we need to organize those people around their real core issues if they're going to be able to be organized to vote for anybody who represents them.
Thank you. Okay, I have Luis Angel.
Yeah, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
So I just want to underscore a couple of things. I think the urgency, obviously, we all feel it, our communities feel it, and the depth of the crisis, I think like Jack mentioned, is just scratching the surface at the moment. But that said, at least within the immigrant rights movement, despite the independence in the politics, in the organizing happening on the ground, happening inside the detention centers, in the hunger strikes, in the fights to abolish detention centers and to stop deportations, despite that independent outlook in politics, there is a wariness, there is a caution, especially when we talk about electoral politics, because the immigrant community has been burned, and it's been burned by people that have said we're allies. And I'm not saying that's us, but I do think that that is the experience of immigrant community members, in particular in relation to the co-optation that they've suffered within the Democratic Party. I think that any real attempt to organize these coalitions from the bottom up has been mentioned, and to really win over the leadership of the immigrant community, it's going to take that groundwork. It's going to take that patient work. And in particular, I'm really interested, and I'll finish at this, in working with the Black community, because I don't think the immigrant community, and at least the leadership of the immigrant rights movement, will not join any formation where the Black community is not present, where the self-organization and self-determination of the Black community is not at the forefront. And that, again, is a precondition for any real outreach and any real winning over of the immigrant rights movement, just from my experiences in the struggle for the last 15 years.
Thank you. Okay, I suggest we move on now to closing remarks. We'll have Donna DeWitt, Nnamdi Lumumba, and Alan Benjamin, each for 3 minutes. So again, I will give a 2 minute, I'm just gonna give a 1 minute warning since it's just 3 minutes, I think. So, yes?
I have a question.
Oh.
For next steps, could we, is there common agreement that we should have another preparatory organizing committee meeting, that we set up a bulletin that we can all share and discuss, and perhaps set up some subcommittees that can help prepare the next organizing committee meeting? These were proposals that were made, and to reach out to more organizing efforts. Do we have some agreement before we go to the closing remarks, or do you want to discuss this in the closing remarks?
Has anyone not agreed to that?
No, I agree. I agree.
Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, so
Awesome.
we've agreed to a bulletin. We've agreed to have another organizing committee meeting before we can decide by email next. We've agreed, all of us, to reach out to more communities, and I forgot the fourth.
Fine.
There were 4 things. Okay.
I'm sure we'll think of it. Okay. So I'm
I'll
gonna just,
remember.
I'll give it, it's just 3 minutes, so I'm just gonna give a 1, the red. Actually, I'll give a yellow, and then red when you're out of time. Sorry, so you'll get a 1 minute warning, and then, so 3 minutes, Donna.
Yeah, but thanks to all of you for sharing your time today on a Saturday. No matter how old you are or what generation you're a part of, we all share the hearts of warriors. And your stories and your comments have been stark. And I think it's increased our anticipation for the Baltimore conference. That's the one thing we need to emphasize, is that we need to move forward with getting folks to the conference. And I'm going to choose to use a quote from our friend Bill Fletcher Jr. from a book he co-authored called Solidarity Divided. And I'm doing so because Bill was in the labor structure serving as an assistant to AFL-CIO President John Sweeney, and he dedicated his book to the veterans of the Charleston 5 Defense Campaign. And his remarks about the campaign were, quote, "The Charleston 5 demonstrated what national and global trade unionism could really be, that we could win. It recognized the crisis that we have in labor. It recognized a new path towards social justice, and is pointed out throughout history in the book Labor continues to make the same mistakes over and over again. We're still facing crisis in organized labor, but the current revival of labor movements, the uprising of workers all around the world, the political activists engaged around the workers' issues reveal the new path towards social justice. And if the process laid out in the book is applied to the future movement, there is a new path to victories. But the crisis of the coronavirus have revealed many of the ongoing inequalities in the U.S. economy and in our workforce, as our nation represents close to a quarter of the world's known coronavirus cases. For us, it should not be about the win, but about doing the right things. We must use the opportunity of the Baltimore Conference to identify a path to break the grip of the two-party system. And that doesn't say breaking the grip has to be about exposing the major parties as being co-opted. So it doesn't say we create that party at that point. We have steps to make, which many of you have said, for many of the disenfranchised voters, party is something they do not trust. And we have, as Alan has said, we have to build trust. And CT's remarks about pre-party are very important. So I'm looking forward to joining with all of you at the Baltimore Conference. While many compare our current situation to the Twilight Zone, I see it as our stars are aligning to direct us to the correct path for justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I up next?
Next.
All right. Yes. So I want to again as well. Can I go?
Yes, please go.
All right. Thank you. Sorry. So I wanted to thank everyone else as well for joining. I'm really encouraged by the collection of organizers from throughout the country. I'm especially encouraged by comrades from the Latino movement. The crisis that colonized and oppressed people's experience is real. It has almost nothing to do, in most people's mind, with the electoral process and his life and death. You know, I grew up in a community that is still very dangerous, and I raised children in a very dangerous situation, whether it's going to school and being miseducated or engaging the police. I mean, there are almost no interaction that colonized people can have with this system that's safe for us. And I lost my faith in the electoral process decades and decades ago. So I don't want to underestimate the importance of building an electoral party, but I do want to make sure that people understand that the power that we really want is not just at their ballot, it's in the people, it's in the working class being conscious of our interests. It's about building institutions that represent working class power. It's about being able to have fight backs that saves people's lives, literally, right? That gives people the space to survive under this democracy or this capitalist democracy. It's about being able to have allies that don't flake on you. You know what I'm saying? Being able to win other Black organizers to this discussion is a challenge, because there's just too much history of the white left getting in, getting what it wants, and then going to hell back to the suburbs, right? And then talking about how great it was to be in the struggle, so and so when. This is a real important issue for us around power and about self-determination, to build real principled allies, right? For us, we're building a party here to get on the ballot. And our expectations aren't that we're going to win elections, but our expectations is that every time we run candidates, we'll get stronger, we'll win power, right? Through that process of struggle. People have to get the hell out of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party hates Black people. With no proof, I don't have to prove to anybody that this party hates and will kill Black people worldwide, right? I don't have to defend my position against that bullshit. We need to be able to build power and have real allies and make a real struggle. And I know it's a process to get there, and I'm encouraging people to stay engaged in this process to check what's really important, saving working class and oppressed people's lives, being able to build an organization that respects the self-determination of oppressed communities, right? And to be able to project the discussion around women as our leadership in the gay community. There are a whole bunch of people who depend upon a real struggle, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, earlier, yeah. My mute button keeps going down. Okay, Alan?
Yeah, I'm encouraged by this discussion. I think we have the core group that's strong, that's not just diverse, but that's committed to maintaining and expanding the outreach toward the working class through its institutions, that is the unions, but also foremost toward Black, Latino, and particular organizations that are fighting day to day to survive, and that fight is going to continue, and it's going to be more vital as we go. It's about organization. And organization, I think, right now concentrates our ability to move forward. We need to expand this organizing committee. This was a meeting invitation only because we wanted to have this discussion to be sure that we're on the same page. I'm encouraged that we are. I think that that's one of the conclusions of this meeting, that we have broad general agreement about what the challenges are, the reality, the stark reality that we have to deal with, the legacy of white supremacy, the distrust that exists, how to rebuild that trust is got to be foremost in our minds. Building an organization, expanding our committee, having ongoing discussion, not only for the purpose of discussing, but for ensuring that as we move this process forward, and it's a process, we root ourselves in these struggles, we inform each other of the struggles, we urge people to get involved in these struggles, we invite people from these struggles to join us in this effort, because the issue of breaking with the Democrats is the central question of the day. That happens at the workplace, it happens in the community, it happens in the unions. That has to be central. Building an organizing committee so that when we meet next, we have 100 organizers, and so that when we meet in Baltimore, we have 500 or more people, so that we lay the basis and the groundwork as we go step by step to build the kind of organization that that's vitally needed. And that's going to take time, but we don't have that much time. So we need to make sure that every step we think about organization, expanding, recruiting, building more, rooting ourselves in the struggles. And I think we're on the good course. And I think Maya pointed out, or I was very inspired by Donna's words, we're on the right course. So thank you all very, very, very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Okay, that, I think.
I
Oh, the host muted all participants.
Sorry.
Okay.
Did they unmute? Did they unmute?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm just there. Okay.
Francisco Herrera. Francisco Herrera.
Oh, everyone's unmuted. So, okay, we have the closing song, I think.
All right. Oh, the closing song. Yes, yes.
I want to ask Nambi a question before. Ask Nambi a question.
Sure.
Nambi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Okay, my question is there have you reached out to the Longshore Local in Baltimore? It's predominantly African American.
We very, very quickly, we do have an organizer who is a longshoreman, and he for a while was able to do some work as far as distributing leaflet information. We got general support, but we have to go back and kind of consolidate that.
Okay, let's work on that. I'm willing to work on that with you. All right.
Great. So who's got the closing song? Francisco?
I am not sure Francisco was able to make it on the call. We'll have to relegate that to our next meeting.
Sounds good.
He's
All right.
amazing. I'm sorry he was not on because he's such a wonderful performer.
Well, now I'm really looking forward to it. Excellent.
All right. Have a
Okay,
good evening.
thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much, everyone.
Thank you all. It was great. It was great.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
So, Namdi, can you share everyone's email addresses?
Yes, we can do that as well. We can, and we also can share audio from this as well sometime in the near future.
Okay, we'll put it on the LCIP website.
Okay.
If you haven't visited, LCIP does have an internet site. Alan?
Website.
LCIPcampaign.org.
Okay.
LCIPcampaign.org.
All right. I'm going to close it out, guys.